And this morning, our Vice President of Engineering, Brady Kimball, is going to tell us exactly that. He's going to go over what's new in Moab HPC Suite 7.0. And after this, we also have some technical sessions that are about upgrade paths and migrations. So those of you who aren't on 7.0, which is probably most of you, will probably want to attend those sessions and think about how do I get from here, where I am now, to 7.0 and take advantage of the capabilities which Brady's going to talk about. As you also probably noticed, Brady is the only VP of Engineering that I know that is in a band and plays the keyboards and harmonica somewhat simultaneously. So we're grateful to have Brady with us and hope you enjoy his presentation. Thank you. Sure.
Okay. Alrighty. Good to be with you today. It's been good to meet with you throughout the last few days, listening to your passion. It's always good for me. You know, we're always heads down back at the office trying to get releases done, trying to get patch releases out, and this always is a jolt of energy for me to get back and continue the fight. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Brady Kimball. I am the VP of Engineering for Adaptive Computing. I've been with Adaptive for 6.5 years. Back started when it was Cluster Resources. So I know quite a few of you as we've grown together in our experiences, and it's good to see a number of new faces such as Preston. So thank you, Preston, for that presentation. It was good to see your transition be successful. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be highlighting things that are new in the Moab HPC Suite in 7.0. So just for clarification, Luis Silva from our product management team did a roadmap presentation and what's new for the Cloud Suite yesterday in a breakout track. So just to clarify, these are all HPC-centric things, as most of you are HPC customers. So one thing that, again, product management is a pure organization to engineering, basically, engineering basically does all the scoping work, all the design work, where product management does a lot of the business requirements and the roadmap. So I'm going to be talking about some key themes that the product management's come up with, but really trying to articulate the technical value at a high level. So these are some key themes that we're really trying to focus on this year, and I think you'll see this reinforced in various presentations throughout the last few days. So we have the large-scale support as people are moving towards exascale and other scale initiatives. We have the core scheduling and intelligence, which is basically Moab's battle test of policies, enhancements to those policies. I would throw usability into this as well, you know, being able to get a window into Moab's intelligence, whether it's through UIs or other things. And then the last thing is integration and channel enablement. I think you've seen that we really are taking the integration pieces seriously with our efforts around the Moab Web Services, which allow customers and partners to integrate the pieces that they need for their business logic or their site's information. So keep these themes in mind as I talk about what we released with 7.0 in February. So this is kind of what we released at a high level. You can follow along, or after this presentation, feel free to Google basically any of the product components 7.0 release notes. Our documentation team has worked with the developers to create a more deeper set of features, enhancements, and things of that nature. But I picked out the most compelling ones from the release. So at the top of the list, and I'll be going into each of these deeper, but we've done Torque. Torque 4.0 has some significant overhauls to it, which I'll be going into about basically taking a lot of the feedback the community's given us, and we'll go into that. The web services is new, which Nathan Wells did a presentation yesterday on. Viewpoint, we have updated the look and feel on the portal, and we've migrated some of the framework to be a little bit more HTML5 standards compliant, that allows customers to plug in their own pages a little bit easier. Gold has been renamed to Moab Accounting Manager. Don't fret, we do have right there in the release notes, you can do a migration. Ryan Chabot will be talking about that in the track later today. We have some more flexibility around job arrays and how they cancel out in case of premature success or failure or some exit code. And lastly, we are trying to broaden our support of various ODBC compliant databases, as a number of you said that MySQL isn't the only database out there. So just to review this last year, for those that attended Moab.con last year, you know, we had Doug Whiteman do a demo for Moab 6.0 and some of the work that we'd been doing there, but obviously that's just a piece of the puzzle. On top of that, we did, 6.1, we did do some caching for the ability to return things quicker through client commands and be more responsive without impacting the scheduling. But obviously, we needed the Torque 4.0 scalability features to have the end-to-end work completed. So what does Torque 4.0 scalability mean? Well, basically, we have a number of different initiatives that went into 4.0 that basically leads to what we would call scalability. So at a high level of those, we have job radix, which allows, instead of the first mom in the job being the mother superior and having all the nodes report back to it, you can actually have a tree now report status back. On top of that, we have the mom hierarchy for reporting state back to the PBS server. And then on top of that, we have added multi-threading to a number of different commands and implementation details such as the authentication and authorization daemon, which allow multiple requests coming in to not be blocked. And lastly, as Preston alluded to in his presentation with the RPP, it does say reliable in the name, but we did transition away from RPP and UDP to TCP. Okay, so going a little bit deeper then, we just to kind of highlight this. So what does the mom hierarchy mean? What does it do? So basically, instead of all of the moms reporting directly back to the PBS server, now you can set up and define a tree of reporting structure where the moms actually will report back up to moms in their subtree. So Ken's going to be talking about this further in some of his best practices track later, actually after my presentation. But you can see here that basically these nodes, or these moms here, report back to this mom, which reports to the server. The recommendation that we're giving right now, just in our test, is that we probably you'd want to set up a master mom per rack, or some structure like that. So taking this, I mean, obviously, just to visualize this a little bit further, you can see the blue leads to quite the traffic jam, but when you have the mom hierarchy split out, you can see it becomes less of a bottleneck. So the visuals are fairly captivating there. So on top of that, so that's the mom hierarchy mechanism. On top of that, you have the job radix mechanism, which basically at submit time, the user basically sets the radix that they want to specify. Now, again, in our tests, we found that the radix of 2 or 3 is probably going to be sufficient for most people. And what you'll see is that basically this allows the communication between the moms about job state to be much more efficient. So again, taking this particular example and showing how there's a bottleneck on the mother superior, it now becomes much more elegant. Okay, pretty simple, basic stuff, but it's very architecturally significant as you're starting to get into communication trees and other mechanisms that can lead to quality concerns, which I'll be addressing as well. So yeah, in this example, it's a radix of 2, so basically path of 2 back up to the server. So here's a table just describing the cost savings and time that we have highlighted. So we have tested up to about 10,000 nodes. In real-world testing, we've done, with real hardware across the network, we've gone up to about 6,000 or 7,000 through rack space. But you can see, basically, we took the numbers that we had and took it to the logical conclusion down here, just on the theoretical side. But you can see how much of a savings you're seeing up here, where you're 99% and above savings in startup times. So pretty cool stuff that we've been doing over the last year and a half. A couple other things. So on top of scale, we're wanting to make torque more reliable, right? So with reliability, really a number of you have experienced, submitting jobs, and basically you get this weird message saying that some node's gone down, or there's a timeout somewhere, and you contact our support department, and we work with you, and then we can't reproduce it because something spiked in at the time of submission. And what you were experiencing was a lot of the timeouts around communication. So we've switched over to TCP. It's allowed us to be a lot more reliable. You won't see nearly the amount of job failures that you've seen in the past. So that's another key win. Also, many of you are probably have been bitten by the PBS IFF bug. So if you're not familiar with that, historically Torque basically does all of its authorization through this client command called PBS IFF that basically uses the sticky bit to submit the job as a particular user. The problem with that mechanism is that every time you go to submit, it executes as a new client command, which, as we all know, executing a process in an operating system is one of the more computationally intensive things you can do. So, as authorization is one of those things that's a cornerstone of executing jobs, we basically abstracted that into an authorization daemon called Torque auth-d that allows administrators to give better control over the users, and you get greater flexibility, and on top of that, you're not going to run into, again, the authorization and failure messages that you might have seen. So we've already highlighted throughput a little bit, but just kind of taking it to its logical conclusion around multi-threading. So this allows you to basically submit more jobs into the system faster. So kind of going back to Doug Whiteman's demo last year with 6.0, this is basically the equivalent work in Torque with multi-threading. And lastly, just various things that we've done internally under the covers to basically speed things up, looking at various algorithms that are hit often and making those more efficient, and looking at how we can optimize further and further, just so that Torque becomes more lean and more mean. So that's a lot of work. I just breezed through a lot of architectural changes. I mean, years of pain that the community's felt. That we just said, you know what, we're going to take the time to do this right. And in the last year, especially, a number of people have been concerned about quality and some of the concerns there. So obviously, I would be remiss as the VP of Engineering and Adaptive not to at least hijack part of my presentation to highlight some of the quality initiatives that we're doing, what that meant for Torque, what that means for Moab and the various product suites. So let's take a little detour for a second. I just want to highlight some things. So you'll notice there isn't a number on the y-axis because the numbers, is relative to Adaptive's test cases. But basically, from the end of 2010 to when we released 7.0, we've had a 5x increase in code coverage, tests that basically have broadened our test suite. On top of that, with 7.0, 4.0, we did an internal use case test fest with various teams in Adaptive, as well as an installation fest to shake out any of the setup problems that you'd have, through just doing basic smoke testing. In addition to that, we've also added automated upgrade testing to our nightly regression. So what this means is that a number of you have been bitten when you've migrated from 6.0 to 6.1, and we wanted to learn the lessons from that and basically say, hey, look, we want to make sure that we feed in various checkpoint files from various sites or simulated sites to be able to test the automation or test the upgrade to make sure that the data integrity is intact, as well as there's no data loss. Also, we have worked with Rackspace. They've been great to work with. Basically, they helped get us set up. We wrote a bunch of test scripts that allowed us to set up systems to do the network testing for Torque. Obviously, we don't have 6,000 servers in Adaptive. So for those that are curious, we set up an account, I believe, that was, you could set up an account for up to 100 nodes, so we basically did an iteration over multiple accounts to get up to the 6,000, but it was very successful. In addition, we've added chaos monkeys, as we call them, where you're intentionally trying to break things to see what the behavior is, so we can know the limitations as well as try to harden the architecture, as stress testing often simulates what you'd experience in production. And lastly, with the web services piece coming into play, this allows us to automate end-to-end system testing. So this means either through the GUI or through the web services, you're executing these client commands, and from top to bottom, going down to torque, executing jobs, and coming back. We've added that to our suites as well. Also, we had a 5-week beta program. I think I saw David Gardner in the audience. Yes, he's in the back there. So David Gardner from our product management team spearheaded our beta program with a number of you and a number of other customers. And this was extremely valuable because, again, with all the tests that I highlighted, we can't always execute your exact workloads. We can't always use exactly your hardware specifications. So this was very, very useful to be able to shake out a number of issues we couldn't find in our tests. So we did get 32 issues. Most of those were critical or above issues that you would have found if the beta customers hadn't found them. So thank the beta customers as well. We will be doing betas throughout our release cycles going forward, so please talk to David Gardner in the back if you're interested in being a beta customer in May for our Evans release. That would be extremely helpful. In addition to that, just a benefit, just a side note with the beta program, people within my team in engineering work directly with the customer to get set up. We want the engineers to get that experience and exposure with you, the customers. So what we typically do is support, we have conversations with support every day around escalated issues. Ryan and I have a very good relationship, and we communicate on a daily basis as well as a number of people on our teams. But the beta program is also a good time for you to get to know engineers within the engineering team. So I wanted to highlight that as well. Okay, so some other things. This is just process things, but I want to instill confidence in you that we have stepped up our game quality-wise. Basically, we have a QA release initiative that says, we can't release the product until these things are accomplished. So we have mechanisms internally to basically decide whether something's a blocker, critical, major, minor, trivial. We use Jira for our issue tracking system, if you're familiar with it. And basically, blockers, crashes, systems go down, data loss, criticals, a feature doesn't work, but Moab still runs. Majors are typically things that are annoying that might pop up every once in a while that do affect job failure or some system thing, but there might be workarounds. Minors are trivial, little things, and trivials are like an error message is spelled wrong. Okay, so basically, we don't allow products to go out with blockers, criticals, or majors. On top of that, we do nightly regression tests, and we basically say, I think the regression tests need to be 95% or better for our regression tests. Now, why not 100%? Well, every so often, our regression tests have some manual intervention that needs to occur. Our regression tests are quite comprehensive, and those, the last 2 to 3% might be going on to hardware and executing the regression test. So we do have this 5% leniency. On top of that, we look for the regression test to be sustainable over time. So we're looking for that 95% over multiple weeks of work, right? We don't want to see 95% above and then it dropped down to 40% because Moab crashed in our regression test or something. So we do look for that. Also, we do check for memory corruption and memory leaks through Valgrind. So basically how this works, and this is basically a dashboard of one of the patch releases, but you'll notice that there's this quality review status in the top right. So any of your bugs, any of your issues that come through, developers will work on it, we'll get a code review, and then it'll go through QA, and if there's documentation, it'll go through documentation review. So built into our workflows, we actually have a process that keeps all the teams aligned so that if those changes need to be made in documentation, we can make those edits. but also QA makes sure that the documentation, the issue, all align so it's working as described, and also this allows us to flesh out our automated test cases if there's test cases that don't satisfy that particular piece. So I wanted to highlight that we have a number of mechanisms in place. In addition, just a highlight also for feature development, we use the Scrum process, Agile development. So this is for patches. For feature development, we basically have QA, documentation, and developers all working together against business requirements and designs from architects. So all this is being fleshed out as we go along, which allows production level features to be developed in a 3-week cycle. Okay. And then lastly, we do have a test case management system, and how this affects you is that basically we are setting up test cases and test suites that are mirroring specific customer sites that might be unique, or product suite features that might have had problems historically. And so this allows us to, with hot button features or hot button accounts, make sure that we are addressing these issues. So just wanted to highlight that we are fleshing these things out. So Torque 4.0, going back then, coming out of that tangent. So Torque 4.0 obviously had a lot of architectural changes to it, and it was put through this process, and the good and the bad news is that we rejected a lot of issues. We gave a lot of power to our QA team to go through and say, hey, this isn't passing acceptance, and the Torque guys were, grit their teeth and work with them to get through. But I just wanted to highlight that we are holding ourselves to a high standard in terms of quality, and especially with some of these significant architectural changes. We wanted to accomplish that. Last thing I want to highlight about this particular aspect is that we have consolidated the Torque and Moab teams. And the good news for you as a customer is that basically instead of having the two teams developing and engineering kind of in a silo, they all are expected to be able to touch the code bases, each of the code bases. So what this means is that when we have designs and things, we're going to be designing things from top to bottom, so we won't have any of those syncing issues that a number of you have experienced with features that have been put into the product historically. So I'll try to leave some time for Q&A after to address some of those things. But moving on, so with the Moab Web Services that was introduced in 7.0, basically we're trying to address this problem of, over time, Moab has had a number of different mechanisms that you use to interact with it, right? So you have your historical wiki format that Josh talked about that we're trying to rename as the Moab RM language. We have the events files. We have the SQL databases for gathering historical data. We have SSS, which is this proprietary XML protocol that our client commands use, as well as a few of our older APIs have used. And you as a customer, you as a partner, want to rip your hair out because you're trying to keep everything straight. So the vision that we have, and it's starting with 7.0, is that basically we have this web services layer that's going to be your single point of entry into Moab. And when we say Moab, we're not just meaning Moab Workload Manager, not just the engine. We're talking about the entire product suite, okay? So what this means is that you're going to start seeing the web services, and you can go right now, if you have a decent internet connection in the hotel today, and look at our web services documentation, and you can see that our developer documentation is there to hold your hand and really help you get the information that you need to query or to interact with Moab. So Ross from Oak Ridge did a joint presentation with Nathan Wells, one of our architects, where he highlighted how he was using web services. So I recommend, if you weren't in that session, that you, when we publish the material, see how he's using it. So the web services piece allows you to query information from the Moab stack, and this includes the accounting manager, this includes, over time, various resource managers. And then we also have this plugins layer with the web services that will allow us to basically take the RM interface that you've historically known kind of to the next level. So this means having dynamic plugins that allow you to push and pull information from Moab, so that even though the scheduling interval is just that, an interval, a loop, you'll be able to, in some push format, be able to push events back to Moab to be pulled up into the next cycle. So the vision here is basically we want to get the architecture to a more contemporary state. And I've shared the story with you, a number of you already, but basically, you know, we've had a number of customers say things like, we need Moab to be as reliable as DNS, right? So with that statement, you know, the light bulb came on and said, well, look, for example, if you need to take Moab down for maintenance, you can take Moab down, you have a caching layer that allows you to still query information on the last executed pull, and your interfaces, the consumers, don't have to know that Moab's gone down for maintenance or for some other mechanism. So things like that, right? We're building more resiliency, we're building in a uniform interface, and we're being validated internally. Our UI developers are developing significantly faster using the web service instead of some proprietary API through some of these mechanisms. So this is going to pay off in large ways, and we are looking forward to collaborating with you as you start using this. So some things to note about it. The web service is a REST API, so if you're not familiar with REST, it's basically a standard or a best practice that allows you to use various HTTP methods to interact with various resources or objects inside of Moab. So here you can see a list of various things that we have included that you can query against, create, modify, delete. And on top of that, just as you probably saw with the roadmap, is that right now the web service is using basically just the private public key mechanism that is built in with Moab. And we recognize that the security needs to be fleshed out further. So we are looking to make that more robust, to build more context in with the rest of the product suite. Okay, so, excuse me. Give me a moment. So moving on to Viewpoint then. So what you see here is a screenshot basically of our new look and feel. Moab Accounting Manager has received this look and feel as well, and we're looking to consolidate, much like our web services, we're looking to consolidate our look and feel and all of our UIs into a single component, right? So a number of you have expressed frustration that you have to set up the product suites and one component at a time. We do have a build engineer working on product suite RPMs that we're hoping to get for Evans that will make your lives a lot easier. So in the meantime, just wanted to highlight that we are consolidating things implementation-wise as well. So with Viewpoint, basically, we're looking to take some of those concepts and things that we've had in the Moab Cluster Manager and kind of take those to the next level. So what does that mean? Obviously, it means Web 2.0, AJAX type of work that also is more usable. So we do have a strong UX component in our company that we're looking to do usability reviews and interviews with customers to see how do we use the system. How do your users, what are the complaints that your customers have of your clusters? And so I'm going to call out Ben in particular. Ben Shmuel right here in the middle. He's the director of UI development that we brought in over the last year, and he has a strong PM background that hopefully you've talked to Ben, but please do share some of your pains and some of the concerns that you have around how to visualize your problems. So the work that we've done for 7.0 is really our first swing at it with how we're going forward with PM and UX. And I think you'll find that it's definitely a step in the right direction. We are looking to flesh out dashboards, flesh out how you administer the system. So as you can see here, this is basically just a dashboard of nodes that you can filter on various attributes. On top of that, we have done some work on our job submission pieces. Really, we see them as a basic template that you can customize based on your various needs. But we have taken a stab at that as well. So hopefully you did attend our roadmap sessions. We are looking at fleshing these pieces out. As Preston said, customers are eager to get their hands on a better out-of-the-box solution, so we are looking to flesh this out further. Moving on then to what's historically been called Gold, Moab Accounting Manager. Basically, Scott Jackson has done a stellar job in taking the Gold 2.2 architecture and enhancing it. So what does that mean? Scott has enhanced the architecture by basically abstracting a lot of the usage records and a lot of the way that Gold does its charges to be able to be charged against basically any object inside of Moab. So this means you can have charge rates for various objects that are being consumed. You can set up your organizational hierarchies however you want. And what I think you'll find is that you start digging into 7.0, and you're going to want to read the release notes on Accounting Manager because there's been a lot done to it. You're going to see that there's a lot of flexibility that you have at your disposal that you can start thinking deeper about your site's charging auditing needs. Now, I did say that this is an HPC Suite discussion, but I wanted to also highlight that, and I don't know if Luis brought this up in his presentation, but we have consolidated our cloud use cases using a workload-driven model. So what this means, I know it's difficult to see, but basically you have these various components, these containers here called virtual containers that basically contain some context about some service. And inside of this, you'll notice that we have jobs. Now, historically with our cloud use cases, we've been using a static VPC partition-based model. And what it had been doing was that it was splitting the engineering team into two. And we want to be able to take into, we want to be able to have our use cases really satisfy everybody because we strongly believe that HPC and cloud have a lot in common, and we've been saying that for years. So we wanted to make sure the implementation reflected that. So the good news here is that basically we've consolidated towards our HPC use cases. So this allows us to flesh out policies. Remember, going back to the key themes with the core scheduling and intelligence, it's going to allow us to flesh out the policies that you've asked for through enhancements and feature requests. So that's good news. So on top of that, we are fleshing out job arrays more. I hear all of you loud and clear with the fact that Moab and Torque have job arrays that are different. That's something that I'd like to address immediately. We do have designs for it. We do need to scope it in, however, to our roadmap. So we do want to make this all top to bottom easy to do. But in the meantime, what we've done in 7.0 with job arrays in Moab is that we basically added the intelligence to say, if certain sub-jobs in a job array succeed or fail or have some certain exit code, I want to error out. So this basically allows users to be more intelligent with their job arrays, or allows administrators to also enforce good behavior with the programming inside of these job arrays. Okay. Also, we have fleshed out our database support, so we've included Postgres as well as Oracle databases for our enterprise customers. And so what this means, obviously you're probably concerned that now you have to have more Moab builds. These are all have been implemented through the ODBC build. And on top of that, I wanted to also highlight that we did get rid of the large builds. Basically, we have standardized against, we have a standard set of attributes that we're doing with our builds now that basically reflects the growing large needs. So no longer will you have to request from your support rep a large build. And then lastly, just a few enhancements. We've done a number of other enhancements, but these are just ones that I wanted to call out as well. Is that basically we've set up, I'll just go one by one on these. So with specific preemptees, what this basically means with QoS, with preemptor-preemptee mechanisms, is you can say now that a preemptor only preempts specific preemptees. So it's again building in more fine-grained detail as to describing who can preempt whom. On top of that, a number of you are familiar with our job reject policy. It's a global policy that basically defines if a job is rejected, what to do, right? So you have ignore, you have fail out, you have email, retry, a number of different mechanisms. What this allows you, a site to do, if you enable this, is basically a user can specify at submission time what their rejection policy should be, right? So for higher priority workload or more important workload, your reject policy might be to mail out or to retry, whereas lower priority, you might just say, hey, ignore or move on, cancel the job. So again, building in some finer granularity. In addition, we've added, basically with reservations, we've added a mechanism to allow you to place reservations across multiple classes using a form of a regular expression. We're looking to flesh this out further, but we have done some work there. And then lastly, as always, we've added some more context to check job for people who are using things like node sets and other mechanisms. But obviously, as we add more and more attributes to check job, it becomes more unwieldy. So this is one of those initiatives, again, that we're wanting to look at check job and check job-v and seeing how we can make it more usable. So I know that Gary and Ben are very interested in this to make sure that our error messages and other diagnostic messages are clear and concise for our customers. So just to review then, so that's kind of it in a nutshell. Just to review, these are kind of the key themes this year, right? So I'm not giving a roadmap presentation, but I have highlighted some things today. And you can see really, if you go back to the things that I described for 7.0, a lot of the work that we did was around large-scale support. People were running into some of the ceilings and the limitations of torque of the 2.5 branches or the 3.0 branches. And we felt like we needed to address some of the foundational scalability concerns first. And what you're going to see going forward with the Evans and Gatling releases is that a lot of the work that we're going to be doing is going to be around the core scheduling intelligence. So Gary's highlighted the topology plugin mechanism that's going to allow us to have greater context about hardware topology. We're going to have greater integration and channel enablement through plugins and other web services pieces. And you're going to see that with the foundation that we've built with 7.0 with scale, it's going to allow us to continue to flesh out some of those core differentiators and why you guys are customers of ours. So that's all I have. So feel free. I'm actually going to jump down. Feel free to grab me, just for sake of time. Actually, we have a little bit of time. I'll take a few questions now, if you have any. No questions? Yes, Joe.
Do I really need that? Yes. The work that you're doing with Torque, now that it's closer to effectively you guys are taking over development of Torque because there's mostly you committing to it, right? Mm-hmm. What does that do to the community version of Torque? Do you see some point in the future where you might just fork Torque and have it be your own thing?
So that's a good question. So just in case, I think everyone heard because you were mic'd. So is Torque open source? What's the community version? There's no plans to split off Torque. But Joe does bring up a good point, which is, and we realized this, over this last year, I asked our guys to look at the commit history of the Torque branches, and like 95% of the commits were from adaptive employees, right? So when I say that we brought it in, it's more of a process thing where they're being able to be more privy to our processes with agile development, our product management process. But we do listen to the community. We're still active with the mailing list. So there's by no means any plans to split off and fork at this point. Good question. I see Jackie's eager.
I hope it's not a difficult question. But in your 14 test universities that you did the test with, was there migration issues going from Moab 6 to 7, Torque whatever to 4, Gold whatever to MWA?
So the question was around migration. So there are some backwards compatibility impacts for some of the components. We have, I think, done a much better job with this release. You'll find through the release notes and our documentation of explaining that. So I know in your case with Lawrence Berkeley, you use Gold. I did, after our discussions yesterday, did confirm looking at the release notes. There's 3 pages of migration notes about how you migrate from a 2.2 instance to 7.0. So we have done that work. Torque 4 obviously with the Torque Auth D, That's adding a new component. There's a number of setup mechanisms that have changed. And I know he's taking pictures right now. I'm going to put Trev on the spot. Trev, who's over our training department, is working very closely with our team to say, hey, let's cut this down. Let's figure out how to make these manual steps easier, because you can migrate from existing versions, but it's a lot more manual than we'd like. So that's why going forward, we want these product suite RPMs to be a lot easier so that it feels seamless. But in the meantime, Trev's actually done some admin training for engineers who aren't installing these on systems like a lot of you are, to show, hey, look, we can make this less painful. So I answered your question and then some. So going back to your original question, yes, we do have migration impacts with some of the components, but we have made sure to document those. Okay, I'll be around the rest of the day, so if you want to follow up with me individually with feedback about things, feel free around engineering things. Obviously, we do have Gary Brown, our HPC product manager, as well as David Gardner in product management around Beta in the audience, so feel free to seek them out. I did this morning just check out the number of enhancements and feature requests in our system. I think we have something like 300, so we are interested in being able to prioritize a number of those based on your guys' feedback, so please don't hesitate. Obviously, you're probably curious what those enhancements are, so we are looking at ways of making those requests transparent, whether it's through some voting mechanism or something. But I hope you're seeing throughout the show and in my presentation, the roadmaps, people's tracks, is that we do listen to you, we do hear you. And we want to continue to strengthen our relationship and strengthen the architecture of the product so that we can continue forward. So thanks for your time. Appreciate it.